Hey gamers, welcome to another episode of Bonus XP. Today we're chatting about Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones and continuing our little full piecing apart the series. I am joined by ActualLizard again and the one and only Professor Bopper. So welcome, my friends.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me on again.
And if you haven't noticed the recurring theme, Lizard will probably be here for every Fire Emblem episode because Jason is a loser and doesn't really play Fire Emblem games. And he's never going to hear this anyways because he doesn't listen to our own episodes. So, rip.
Whereas I am deranged for Fire Emblem. So
Deranged. You heard it here first.
Yeah, and I've probably written more words about this series than anyone reasonably should. I'm okay, but I'm ready for it.
So I thought it'd be fun to talk about Sacred Stones today, and I think it's safe to say like this is a miserable game, right? Like nobody actually likes this one.
Yeah, I don't like this game.
Yeah,
I think this game is terrible. One of the worst on the Game Boy Advance.
it's true. I've replayed it hundreds of times because it is my Sisyphean task to try to find something to like about it.
Yeah. So just doing the creature campaign on loop for 20 years. Trying desperately to recruit Orson.
That was a great episode, guys. Thank you. And yeah, I think that's all we have to say about Sacred Stones.
All right.
Have a good one.
All right. Thank you. You can find me on youtube.com. Thank you for having me.
No, but really, I think the complete opposite. You would say, Bopper, I think that this is probably your favorite Fire Emblem, right?
It depends on the day that you ask me, but it's 1A and 1B with echoes, and then you've got Path of Radiance that's like 1C.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the same way with Path of Radiance, Sacred Stones. I think those are the two where they're the biggest toss up for me for favorites. How about you, Lizard? Where does this kind of land for you?
Oh, Sacred Stones is my favorite video game of all time.
Oh, really?
For a while, I had it 1A, 1B with Thracia, but it is now one exclusive.
Yeah.
That is bold. That is bold.
I feel like now I'm just going to come off as a hater for the rest of the video.
You set the bar too high,
Yeah.
man. We're never going to be able to keep up.
It's true. If you guys say anything bad about my favorite, I'll be very upset.
Well, why don't you start us out then and like let us know, why does this game matter so much to you? Like what makes it so meaningful, and when abouts did you play it? Because I mean, depending on where you are entry wise, this could be one of your first or this could be more recent.
Yeah, this was the second Fire Emblem game I ever played. I played it the year it came out, but it was the first one I beat. When I played Fire Emblem 7, which was the first one I played, I don't know exactly how old I was, but I was pretty young, and Fire Emblem was too hard for my baby brain. And then Sacred Stones came out, and I was like, hey, I can beat this one. So I think while I liked Fire Emblem 7, 8 was where I really fell in love with the series, which is perhaps part of why it has such a special place in my heart.
See, I played it first. It was the first game I played, and a long time ago, really long time ago, and unfortunately these videos are gone. When I was about 13, I did Let's Plays on YouTube. I had like 40 subscribers, maybe, and 2 people that actually watched it, but the one person that commented recommended, like, oh, you've got to try Fire Emblem, the Sacred Stones, on the Game Boy. And I played it, and there was a blind playthrough of me playing through it, and I was taking this guy's advice. I remember the very first piece of advice he gave me was don't use Seth, which feels like something from a really innocent bygone era. So
that old game fact
Yeah.
that has Seth is not a good character on there pretty boldly. Yep.
So I have this sort of reverse from Lizard where I played Sacred Stones first, and it was very difficult because just the discovery that I could look at where the enemies could go and then put a character at the very edge of that so that they don't get swarmed by like 8 guys and die was revolutionary. When I was on like chapter 15, I was like, oh my God, I can do so much. So I played it first, which maybe that biases it a little bit, but I don't care.
This was my second. Being the boomer that I am, I was like old enough to get into this genre of gaming because I think this came out my freshman year of college. I remember like hanging upside down in my lofted bed and playing on my GBA and busting this game out. And at first I think it was a little rough for me because I think FE7 does such a good job of character feel. Maybe that might be the one advantage that 7 has over 8, where I was like, well, but this doesn't like Eirika doesn't feel like Lynn, you know? And Hector had such a personality, so I didn't really get into it until a little bit further on when you get to things like split promotions or the split route. I think that's when the game really started to sell me more. Like, there's a lot more going in here. And then narratively, obviously, it is a better game. Not that we ever think of Fire Emblem games as being like pinnacle narrative games, but they are there. And I feel like this one is a lot more serviceable than FE7's. So it was nice to see that step up.
I do feel like, for me, this was the start of the era where I kind of did expect Fire Emblem to have good stories, because I liked the story in 8, and then I liked the story in 9 and 10 as well. So, like, this is the era where I was like, yeah, I kind of do expect a good story out of Fire Emblem.
Yeah, and I'm almost the exact opposite again, because for me, at least now that I have the knowledge of the whole series, this sort of feels to me like we're reaching the peak right before the decline of Fire Emblem story quality, because I actually think 7 has a perfectly fine, fun, comedy in the traditional sense story.
Sure, it's like, for being a Western launch title, it is like a serviceable entry point.
Yeah.
It's definitely not doing the wild things, which I know you're talking about, like the newer games does. But it's light, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a story, and it is here, and it's easy to follow.
And I think really from like Genealogy of the Holy War through Sacred Stones, there's only one game I don't think has a particularly good story, and I think Sacred Stones is definitely the peak of the simpler stories. Or you could 1A, 1B it with Path of Radiance, but I think as a whole, Sacred Stones is just about as good as the series has been with narrative, and I don't mean that as an insult, because I think this game is one of the ones that is genuinely well written.
How many times have you guys run through it at this point?
Too many.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
For me, I've beaten this game 4 or 5 times, probably.
Oh, wow. Real? I would have thought it would have been more.
Well, like with all Fire Emblem games, there's about 15 runs that stopped around chapter 13 somewhere out there, but
okay, so we're not counting those.
I'm not counting those.
Okay.
I'm counting the times I have made the credits roll.
Got you. Okay. I follow now. I'm picking up what you're putting down. Do you think the split route is one of the reasons why this is such a solid entry for so many different people?
I do consider this the gold standard of route splits in Fire Emblem. And I don't know if that's why so many people play it, because I feel like a lot of people actually just pick one route that they keep playing. Like, even me, I have played both routes, but I would say I play Eirika route 95% of the time.
When we were younger and we played the game, it was definitely like, guys don't play as girl protagonists. I'm gonna be Ephraim. You know what I mean? But now it's like, no, female protagonists are lit. I'm totally gonna play as Eirika. I felt like it's very different now. Where I was kind of the same. I mean, like, this dude has lances. Of course I'm gonna use him, and his stat growths have been so much better than hers have. So why not? But I feel like now, knowing the meta or the narrative or like the chapter impact and whatnot, it is so much more enjoyable to do both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to play Eirika as well. I know a lot of people like Ephraim route because of its, I guess we'd call it perceived higher difficulty, which is reality is just Phantom Ship, which is just a mean map for new players. I don't really like Ephraim route all that much to play because I think the Geb map, which is chapter 9, is maybe the most annoying map in the whole game, the most obnoxiously boring other than 5X.
Which one is that?
That's the one where you get Tana and recruit Amelia in Ephraim route, and you just get clogged up in that hallway. And it's just not the best, but I don't know. I feel like not a lot of people play it for the route split, probably because the route split's very they're mutually exclusive. Technically they both happen narratively, but from a player perspective, it's really only one happens. So it always felt a little like a curiosity to me, like, oh, I'm going to go back and see what happened over here. But functionally, they're so similar that I don't think it's necessarily a drawing point for the game.
That's fair. I guess route split is a really strange way to phrase it when it should be something more like perspective split. Because when you think of route split, we're thinking more like Fates, where literally the game is completely different depending on which way you go. And here it's just kind of like, well, what was Ephraim doing while Eirika was doing this? There's not really, who are these characters that he's bringing with him that he picks up along the way? There's not too much of a narrative difference when you get to the end.
Yeah, although I think that's actually more of a modern understanding of route splits. Like, I remember back before Fates, or God forbid, back in the forum days, you talked about route splits and they would just be like 2 chapters long. Like it would be like, did you go to Ilia or Sake in the route split?
Or like there's the one in Blazing Sword where it's, you get, what's it? Germain. I never remember the boss's names. It's Germa and the other one, and it's
Kenneth is the other one, right?
And it's
your 3 lords are like level 50 or above, then you go this way, and if they're 50 and below, you go that way. Like that's what entails it.
There's the one that's like the guiding ring users, and it's if you go this way, you get an annoying map, but if you go this way, you get an even more annoying map. That's almost the exact same. And it's okay. So I do think, actually from like a Fire Emblem's fan's perspective at the time, this definitely feels like one of the more thoughtful and less random ones, because the conditions in the older games, like in Binding Blade, if you go Bartray or Echidna, it's entirely arbitrary from a new player's perspective. And it's still arbitrary to me why it's based on that village as far as a conscious decision that you make, because
it's
you
something so much more impactful.
You know anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's something more impactful about like I'm choosing to pursue this character's story than like I visited this village, which for some people you just visit that village so you can get the better item, right? Like you don't even think about it from a route perspective. You might not think about it from a route perspective.
Yeah, and then in some of the games, you don't even realize you're making a decision. Like when you were talking about the one where it's based on if you trained the guiding ring users, you don't know that that's a decision you're making the first time you play the game.
Yeah, and it's sort of like, if either of you ever played Silent Hill 2?
Yeah.
So, Silent Hill 2 has like different conditions for its ending where you'll, depending on your behavior towards like partner NPCs and stuff, it'll change the way they behave towards you. It'll change the ending, and it feels very like organic and in the world. Whereas I think some of the older Fire Emblem route splits feel like, I don't know why guiding ring users do this, and like I can't piece together why I ended up in this spot. But you are making a call in Sacred Stones, although I do think the deck is stacked in Eirika's favor, because the first time I played it, I was like, well, I've played as Eirika the whole time, and I don't know who Ephraim is.
Sure.
So I'm just going to go with Eirika.
Definitely pushing you that way. I think you're right. It does have a little bit of a Pokemon Fire or Pokemon Red Blue. Like, why are these different games? Because nothing really different is happening, And even the later ones, you can say that it's a different legendary that you're encountering, but at the end of the day, it's very light. So it's kind of like the poor man's version of a Pokemon choice in that way. All right, well, beating the route split aside, I know one thing whenever I watch like Mecha's character analyses, and he talks about the recruit units, and that's something I want to talk a little bit about here too, because they are always the characters that you probably shouldn't use, but they're so much fun to use. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts on, Ewan and Amelia and Ross. Like, what is it about these characters that's just so like you want to use them even though you shouldn't?
I think they do a very good job of telling a bit of a story better than a lot of other bad units do. Like, in a lot of games, you get a bad unit, and they're just a bad unit, right? Like,
Cancel him. He said bad unit.
Like, you have a better version of that unit elsewhere that does the same thing but better. But with the recruits, you don't. There is something unique about them. They start in their little baby class. They have a cute, funny animation that just makes you want to use them, right? Like,
yeah,
in most
absolutely.
games, I don't like using those types of units, but I really love dragging you into Summoner every couple runs of Sacred Stones.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, I've become increasingly like jaded towards the good unit, bad unit discussion the more I've played Fire Emblem, because, and maybe this is just because, you know, I've been streaming these games for almost 3 years, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm retired from pretending I play optimally. But I think the benefit of these characters in this game is that, like Lizard said, or like you all were talking about, they tell a fun story. They're generally pretty unique. It's actually why Amelia is my least favorite of the three, is because Rosh, you get early enough to where you do kind of get that connection with him. You kind of got to use him a little bit. You know, he's going to be there, whether you like it or not.
So if you want to invest, you at least have the opportunity to,
Well, you form that connection with him pretty quickly, because we always bias the first characters that we meet. He's got the relationship with Garcia, so it's not just a gameplay thing. We see it happen in the story. And then Ewan is just so, like, unique and so comically bad for when he joins, but also not frustrating, because the 2 range and then going Summoner. So, like, I really enjoy using them. And I think also we tend to talk a lot about how, you know, this unit's good, this unit's bad, but there's also like a very fun skill expression in the game of like taking a bad unit and just dragging them to, at the very minimum, mediocrity.
Well, you want to talk about like you making good content. Anyone who plays Sacred Stones, who's streaming, like, it's just guaranteed good content. Like, everyone in the chat is rooting for you to use these characters. You know, they want them to live. They want you to beef them up as much as possible. They're like the last character that they ever want to see you lose. I don't remember who it was that I was watching, but they were upset that when they lost one of the recruits, they didn't restart, even though they were playing like a full Iron Man, because that's how much enjoyment you get out of seeing these like subpar characters in use over and over. And I agree with you, Bopper. Like, at the end of the day, just have fun with your Fire Emblem. Like, don't worry about the meta characters and worrying about who you're picking, because it is so much fun, you know. And we do get these favorites. I don't know why I was so drawn to Amelia when I played my very first time, and I think it was kind of that whole same thing. And back then, I think playing Fire Emblem, and we're talking, I think, 18 years ago, casual play of Fire Emblem was the norm. So going to the tower and raising a character like that, there was just something really drawing about how to like watch her grow and play her, and, you know, turning her into a knight instead of a cav, because you rarely see a female knight, and then all of a sudden you have a dodge knight. And how weird is it that we have this character who's just like so opposite of anything else that you have in your roster. It's like you said, comical, but it's also fun. Like, it makes the game so much more enjoyable.
I think Sacred Stones is also almost a perfect game for them, because either this or FE9 are the best possible games to be like a funny project unit in, because it's really not that bad to train any of them, because Sacred Stones is definitely on like the lower end difficulty wise. So it's just kind of fun to use these units and not too much of a pain.
Mm-hmm. And I also think Sacred Stones generally, this might sound weird because the game is so easy, but I think once you get outside of, like, I don't know, Seth, most units are kind of bad when they start. Like, the recruits are obviously in their own tier of bad, but almost everyone is some degree of project in this game. outside
I
of like Seth
agree.
and Dusel, because even like
Yeah.
characters like, you know, Cormag, I've seen new players kill Cormag almost instantaneously because there's, you know, even the quote unquote top tier characters still have to be built up from something. We're just talking about a matter of degrees here with the recruits.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at like your Franzes and your Vanessas, you're going to be feeding them kills in the early game because they can't get them on their own. So training units is just something you do in Sacred Stones.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of training, I think the last thing I want to talk about, and I think it's potentially one of the best things that Fire Emblem has ever done, is the branching promotions. Why do you think that people get so much joy out of this branching promotion, like the paths that you can take? Like, what is it about it that this made this so well accepted, as opposed to something like in Three Houses or Awakening, where for the most part anyone can be anything?
I think for me, it strikes a nice balance of allowing some choice, but restricting me such that I don't suck all the fun out of my game by making everyone the same couple good classes.
Sure.
I also think this is like an interesting example of a system that shows that like even when choices aren't balanced, it's still fun to have them because almost no promotion choices are balanced in this game. There's like 2 where there's not an obvious good choice, but like it's still fun to play the game again and put units in the funny classes that you didn't do last time, for me at least.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, well, and I'd go off of that with like, okay, because I've heard a lot of people say like the class choices aren't balanced, and I think from an optimal perspective, they're definitely not. The only one that's really kind of a debate from like an optimal gameplay perspective is Garrick's to hero or ranger.
Sure.
But I think they are, for the most part, except for that one, ironically enough, I think they're all very well fun balanced. Like what you're saying, Lizard, where like you have a ton of options for the recruits. It's fun to send them into all these different paths across multiple playthroughs. And usually they're pretty distinct. Your choices are pretty distinct from one another, even if it's not in a particularly optimal way. I think you always get different flavor. And one of the things I really like about this system is it's not stressful. Like, it's a little bit on a blind playthrough because every blind player is nervous. Like, am I going to screw myself over? Which you're not really in this game because of the difficulty. But like reclassing and stuff in a game like Fates, I don't really enjoy. I just get stressed out because it uses resources that are very limited with hard seals, partner seals, friendship seals, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of open choice, so you really could be breaking a unit without realizing it, one way or the other. And you're blind to like all the skills in the game until you just know that inside out. Whereas here it is just, it's within the natural flow of the game's progression because you're just going to be promoting everyone. And it's not as if master seals are a limited resource because like you promote Namie, that Orion's Bolt has no one else to go to. Or if you promote, you know, there's not a whole lot of really tough item management you have to do around it the way you do in Three Houses or Fates.
Right, like Holm and maybe Ross are the only people that can use it. The Ocean Seal, is that right? So
Yes.
you're totally right. I feel it's just so curated in this game. I think that's kind of like one of the big words where, like you were saying, Bopper and Fates, it's really stressful when you have unlimited choice, and how they kept it in like just like Sacred Stones does it, where every class does have their branching paths. You would have less to worry about.
Yeah. When you have unlimited choices with limited tools, that can be so anxiety inducing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard me talk about it, but we did an episode on jobs and classes, and K-Bash was on the episode, and I play a game like Etrian Odyssey where you're building a party, and you have to like determine what classes everyone's going to be, and then when you multi-class, and I always tell the story of how one time my husband like went to work for 2.5 or 3 hours, and he came back, and I'd started the game when he left, and I was a ball of nothing when he came back because I didn't know what to choose because there were too many options. And that's how I sometimes feel like with what you're saying when you look at the meta so much of Fire Emblem games where engage can be really tough because literally anyone could go anything. Three houses the same way, but this takes it away. You still get a little bit of a choice. It's kind of like that good old service industry, like when you go up to someone, do you want this for dessert or this for dessert? It makes it like, oh, I get to pick one of these, as opposed to saying, do you want dessert? Because then there's so many options, and it's so much easier to say like, no, I don't want to do this. So yeah, the choice is there, but it's so simplified, and it kind of respects the players in that way too.
Yeah, I also think that some of the more complicated reclassing systems in more modern Fire Emblems have just a much higher burden of knowledge on the player, which is really rewarding once you have it. Like, Conquest is really fun to like plan a run for and think about all of your reclassing and skills once you know how to do all that. But at least for me, it makes those games a little harder to pick up and play. Whereas Sacred Stones, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to play it and I'll make Kyle a great knight this time. And it's not going to mess anything up for me.
Yeah, or a game like the DS games, which can also be fun to plan around, but like they have infinite and free reclassing systems, but it's so broad for each character that I feel like a lot of players on their first, second, or even third go-throughs of the game are like, I don't know, Abel's a cav, I'll just leave him a cav. I'm not going to mess
I think
with
people
all that.
really get stuck in canonical, and putting huge quotation marks around that, canonical classes, where, oh, this character only can be this, or it makes more sense for Garrick to be a hero than a ranger because blah. And I don't necessarily buy into that, but I mean, like, I also respect when people are like that too. But it is kind of funny when you're playing something like, what is it? 11 and 12, is that right?
Yeah, Shadow Dragon and New Mystery.
Ones, where like, you just make Drog a dark mage and go completely silly with it.
or make him into a 2 defense axe fighter, and it's like, but yeah, most of the time you players in me, I'm gonna look at that, I'm gonna be like, I see all the information. It's not like Conquest where it's kind of all hidden behind the knowledge. They're showing you a nice little spreadsheet, here's all the stats, how they're gonna change, and I'm like, never mind. I'm hitting the B button and leaving this menu.
Yeah.
There's no way the game's decision could be that wrong, so...
Okay, so class-wise, Sacred Stones probably does it better than a lot of the other games. Split Route, we're down with. We said... we enjoy the characters, the difficulty maybe a little bit easy. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to add on to our conversation or retouch back on that we didn't go into enough detail about?
Well, I would like to emphasize the story just a little bit more than just kind of generally praising it for being good.
Yeah.
Because I think... For one, this is a game that's kind of perfectly paced. This game does get some criticism for being very short.
It is short.
It
It's
is
like
very
usually
short.
4 or 5 chapters shorter than the regular, right?
Yes, it is. It's quite a bit, especially because the early game maps are also all very short in and of themselves. So even the chapter total is kind of misleading. We maybe have, 17, 18 chapters worth of Fire Embleming that you can do in this game compared to like the average of the series. But like one, I think the pacing is incredibly well done. I think of a game like Awakening that just sort of stalls out in order to be long enough to let all of its mechanics develop. So the story just kind of takes a break from being, relevant or good so that we can explore all the gameplay aspects. And I think what helps this game work really well story-wise is all the villains. I don't want to get into a bunch of them because we don't have a ton of time. But I think this game has probably the best villain spread in the series, and it hits all of its kind of... Fire Emblems wants to be like serious, it wants to be silly sometimes, and I think its villain cast here does a very good job of having like really, really evil bastards like Orson, who... Not Orson, Valter. I want to mention Orson, but Valter,
Valter,
who is at once really threatening because the first thing you see him do is murder Seth. And then oh my God, I have to fight this guy? and he kind of becomes a menace through the whole playthrough, or you get, characters like Orson that actually have very brief roles in the story, but it's really effective and it's really brief. It doesn't overload you the way a game like Three Houses, Engage, or Fates does with its endless cutscenes. So I think this is
how cool would it be to have more betrayals like Orson's in other games and have them be really meaningful? Like, what if Orson was the character that you invested in a little bit only to turn on you, like what if we saw something like that more, and to see that on a GBA title is pretty incredible.
Well, we'll probably get to this later, but I feel like Fire Emblem as a series is just incredibly risk averse. So I don't think we'll ever see, unfortunately, a character that you can really develop and then something like this happens, but it's fun that you at least did have that connection to Orson, and he is such a great parallel with Seth. So it's really got everything going for it.
Yeah, I also really love the villains in this game. The one you didn't quite talk about there, Leon, is actually one of my favorites in the series. And I think he works really well in Sacred Stones because it's such a character-driven story. And his relationship with Eirika, where they were friends when they were kids, and we get these flashbacks to how they grew up, really makes him a compelling villain for me. I buy into that relationship being interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes that scene that everybody hates. I like that scene. It works. It makes sense for the relationship.
And I'm going to be honest, the scene that everybody hates from late in this game involving Leon is one where I think sometimes people get too much logic brain and they can't get into the internal lives of the characters, which I think this game does a very good job of drawing us into. That decision makes perfect sense if you empathize with Eirika and think about her on a human level instead of just a raw mechanical, why didn't person do logic thing.
I know. They give us all these flashbacks showing us how much they care for each other and value each other, and then people are like, "Oh, well, she should have just not listened to him."
Well, if that were me personally, I just would have blicked him the moment he showed up in the egg map.
So stupid.
Let me deliver my one annoyance with FE8's story though. I hate Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is the one where Eirika finally gets to the castle where she believes Ephraim is captured. And then she steps inside and they trap her. And then Ephraim, who has miraculously evaded capture, is like, now I'm here to rescue you. And then he does it again in Chapter 15. And I'm like, could we not have let Eirika have a moment here?
Mm-hmm. And I'm fine with it being an 8. I hate that they double dip on it. I'm fine with it being an 8 just because of the whole Orson thing.
It would be one thing if they did it once.
Yeah, but they double dip on it, unfortunately, and that makes it so much worse.
I mean, it wouldn't be a Fire Emblem game if they didn't have male characters saving female characters, right? It's not like, again, when I go back to things being poor writing and poor choices and tropes that we gladly see removed from games now, I feel like that is definitely one of the big ones.
Yeah, but that's one of the weird ways about the way it frames it from a story versus gameplay perspective, because I'm honestly fine with the trope kind of here in this instance, because on a gameplay level, you're just still playing as Eirika and you just still beat the shit out of everyone in this entire castle. So regardless of the fact that Eirika got like they say Ephraim saved us, but really all Ephraim is doing is getting annoyed by cav reinforcements in the bottom left of the map, while Eirika leads the actual business in the right side of the map. But it is the double dip that bothers me later on in the game.
Yeah, but that's really my only major grievance. Otherwise, I really love the story in this game. One thing that's funny about it, I know we mentioned earlier that the routes can feel kind of weird. There's actually a novelization of FE8 that I read recently, and I would say 2/3 of the book is Eirika's route, and then they do Ephraim's entire route in one chapter. So the author of the novel agrees with you guys on that.
Yes. The only interesting thing in Ephraim's route is Null. And
Who kind of comes after it.
Yeah, he only gets his cutscene at the very end of the final Ephraim route map with the best line of dialogue in the whole game, which is him asking, has the execution been moved up? And then it's back to everything being the same again.
You could always do what Mecha's doing and just completely divide the characters up based on how you feel canonically they fit in with a story, and then play both sides. I don't know, maybe you're not as cool as he is or whatever, but
Yeah, but also that's hacking your game. So
and that's illegal. We don't do that here.
I never play on the Nintendo PC. No, it is a cool thing, and I would love to see I guess that would be the big remake thing, but I don't want to get in a remake discourse because then that's just, that's a spiral.
Oh, don't worry. We have that episode planned, Bopper, and I would love to have you on that one in the future.
Boy, please do, because I have the worst opinions on remakes.
Oh, no,
I'm the most toxic.
Would love to hear them. All right. Well, on that note, I think that pretty much wraps up the discussion on Sacred Stones. I want to thank you all for making these episodes possible, of our Patreon supporters. Lizard, Bopper, I want to thank you both for being here. This, as usual, has been great. Bopper, what have you got in the pipeline going on right now?
Well, this is exclusive content, I guess. I've got 3 kind of simultaneous projects I'm working on. I won't dwell on them at all, but one about Three Houses versus Engage and sort of how they fit into Aristotelian understandings of drama. One on Berserk and how it subverts traditional tragedy structure by being the first and really only major manga to properly utilize the unique long form medium of serialized manga, and a massive video on Gen 1 Pokemon and how its completely terrible balancing creates a unique experience and tells a ton of bizarre ludonarrative stories with its just such whack cast of characters.
If you hear a shattering noise in the background, that would be my heart, because the next video is not a Castlevania. Castlevania 3's coming, but that's not a massive project. That's a okay.
Yeah, that's a stopgap project, but it will still be good.
Okay, good. I'm very much so looking forward to that. Lizard, what do you have going on?
Yeah, I've been continuing to stream my drafts from the Forever Draft, which was when we drafted the entire Fire Emblem series in one sitting. So I'm finishing up Three Houses right now. Depending on when this comes out, I may or may not be done with that and on to the next one. Other than that, the only major video project I'm working on, actually related to this video, might be out around when this comes out. I'm not sure. Me and a friend of mine are working on a video rebalancing Sacred Stones' promotion options.
Oh.
So I think that'll be a fun watch if you like Sacred Stones, if you want to hear more about it.
Well, if you like being a part of the conversation, obviously give Professor Bopper and ActualLizard a follow on their YouTubes, or you can hop on over to our Discord, Twitter, or X now, I guess, or Instagram at HeyRPGaymer. We want to thank you all for listening. Now go out there and get gaming.